So good afternoon again. Welcome back after the coffee break. We're now entering session 3, the last session of this workshop, which I have the pleasure in co-chairing with Zaid Freyas. Zaid is probably known to many of you. She's the head of division for our Human Medicines Evaluation Division. Now, the last session is really focusing on what we said at the outset. One of the key deliverables of this workshop will be broad agreement on key principles for electronic product information. And you will have all received a written draft of those. And part of this session will be walking you through the 10 key principles that have been pulled together over the last 12 months. But in session 1, I recall somebody saying that it's very important that we focus on EPI and also the need for an EU common standard. And I think that's been recognized by consensus that the first step will be the delivery of a common standard. And so it's quite fitting that the first presentation in session 3 is focusing on just that, the common electronic standard, potential features and use cases. And this is work that's come out of a virtual discussion group looking at the common standard. And I'm pleased to present Elizabeth Scanlan. Libby is working in the Medical Health Information Department here at EMA. She's one of our medical writers. She has a PhD in molecular biology. And prior to joining the EMA in 2016, she worked in a non-for-profit biotechnology sector in the field of communication. Libby, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So as Melanie said, we have found through the mapping and consultation exercises we've been doing so far, and also indeed from this morning's discussion, that the need for a common EU standard is seen as a very important and necessary first step for the implementation of EPI in the EU. So with this in mind, as Melanie said, some of the NCA colleagues from the member states in the HMA Better Use Group and some representatives from industry have had recently some discussions on this topic in order to try to begin to compile a list of the features and use cases that this common standard would fulfill. So I would like to share these with you now. But first of all, I would like to just briefly discuss the common standard itself. And I think we have heard a lot of what I'm saying, in fact, this morning. So I hope it's not too repetitive. Maybe we can, hopefully, my talk will maybe bring together and summarize a little bit of what we've already been hearing from many of the presenters already. So here is our draft definition that we propose for the common standard. This is the technical features, which include markup language, control vocabularies, and interoperability specifications that are agreed by regulators and stakeholders. And this standard will allow us to generate EPI to fulfill the key principles that we adopt, that we agree. So common standard involves more than one technology, and the technologies are mixed together, form the common standard that we would then subsequently agree. One of these would be a markup language. So I think we've heard a lot already about XML, and a markup language is used to annotate and structure the PI. And one of the main uses of the markup language is that it allows us to define how the content should be displayed on a web page. In addition, the common standard should include vocabularies, control vocabularies, so that the same words are used to describe the same important facts about, for example, indication, formulation, and so on. And we also have heard a little bit this morning about the SWOR project, which is the EMA implementation of ISO IDMP control terminologies. What is the purpose of having these standardized vocabularies in the common standard? It is that they will enable searches across all PIs and indeed across PIs and other systems. And a third technological aspect of the common standard is the use of interoperability specifications. These are specifications about how the data in the PI should be organized in order to allow the EPI to interact with other systems. And so the purpose of having interoperability specifications included in the common standard is so that the EPI can talk to other health systems. And we have heard already this morning and from colleagues in the Commission how this could be useful. So in order to decide a common standard, the first step is that we have to decide what are the features and the use cases that we want the common standard to support. So in our discussions, we began to compile lists of features and use cases. However, these are not exhaustive lists, or neither are they definitive. It's just that we want to begin to think in this way of features and use cases, which would be the first step in a project to define a common standard. And in fact, neither have we prioritized the features and use cases, and this would also be something that's very important. I think it has already been mentioned by colleagues this morning that of course, we can think of many amazing things that EPI could do, but ultimately, when we begin to try to implement and move forward, we need to think about high priority use cases and features first and then move onwards. So a lot of these features have already been mentioned by you, so it's actually good to see that our discussions are reflecting what we're hearing today from our stakeholders. This list of features is referring to the data, the EPI data itself. We feel that it should be available as open data so that it can be used and reused in other tools. Also, we feel that the data should use the SPOR terminologies. These terminologies, which is the ISO IDMP terminologies, are already included in some regulatory submissions, and moving forward will be included much further in regulatory procedures. We will keep in mind the desire to use EPI throughout the assessment processes. Some NCAs wish to adopt a digital-first approach and start using EPI from the very beginning of the evaluation, and this must be kept in mind when we are developing the common standard. And as I mentioned, the common standard must include, we feel it should include specifications to make it interoperable with other e-health systems. We have heard about cross-border healthcare, and we can think of many, many other systems where the link to EPI would be useful and beneficial, such as clinical decision support systems, e-health records, and so on. Another feature mentioned is that the EPI should be accessible from the package, so via possibly a barcode. The EPI should be possible to provide the correct EPI for the correct medicine. We know that with changes in the EPI, there is often perhaps more than one EPI that is correct at a particular time. So we should have a way that we can provide the right EPI for the right batch of the medicine. Also, the value of versioning has been mentioned, so there is certainly value and use to having availability of the different EPI updates and being able to see how the EPI has changed. And data security and privacy is an absolute priority, which means protecting the patient's data and also, in addition, ensuring security so that the product information data cannot be interfered with in an unauthorized way. We also discussed some features which are moving a little bit outside the data into the actual applications and the user experience. So this would relate to the applications that use the EPI. We would like to have the possibility to include different types of multimedia in the EPI, such as, of course, videos about how to administer your medicine. The availability of accessible formats we see as a very key advantage to the EPI. The EPI will enable provision of the product information to those who have difficulty reading the paper, who are not able to use the paper format. And we also feel that the electronic format will actually increase accessibility also to those without internet access or with low digital literacy. We feel that having the information available in an electronic format can enable offline options and other options, and we absolutely are committed to not leaving patients behind. The project is about expanding access and improving access to the product information. The EPI, we can see, would allow links to other relevant information, such as educational materials, and also layering. so that the patient could access lay summaries, but also could go deeper and look at more scientific information should they so wish, such as perhaps clinical trial results or assessment reports or so on. The importance of the availability of a multilingual EPI, so if the PI is available in other languages, that this should be accessible, is also a feature. And the EPI should enable user-friendly applications with easy navigation and search and functionality to save preferences such as My Medicines. And in addition, the functionality to set up alerts on the product information for your medicines. In the future, we could then see, and I certainly think that there are many, many possibilities, that there could be additional efficiencies found in the regulatory process, for example, possibly using EPI in other aspects of the regulatory process, such as readability testing of the package leaflet. EPI could link to apps, for example, for dosing that would help patients to adhere to their dosing regimen. And as has been mentioned already, EPI could support reporting of adverse effects and collection of real-world data. I would like to mention a few use cases, but I am also repeating, and it's good to see, in a way it's reassuring for us to see that these use cases have been mentioned by the stakeholder representatives already. The use cases are basically the story or the narrative of how a particular person would interact with the EPI. From the patient perspective, the patient could have a list of her medicines in an app. She could, if she doesn't remember how to take a particular medicine, go to that section, get a downloadable video. She could keep the video offline about how to take her medicine. So a reminder about how to take her medicine. The patient could set up alerts, as we have already mentioned, and as I've already mentioned, could link from the EPI to other material. From the point of view of the healthcare professional, one use case is that the healthcare professional in the e-prescribing system checks renewal of a prescription for medicine for a chronic condition, and can see new information in the prescribing system, as it also has been mentioned by our pharmacist colleagues this morning. If that information is relevant for the patient they're renewing the prescription for, then they can approve renewal of the prescription and contact the patient in some way and discuss the new information with that patient. I think, as colleagues have already mentioned, we can really see how this kind of use case can really support regulatory authorities with when we have new information and we want healthcare professionals to take that into account for particular patient populations. This can really support our existing mechanisms for doing this. And healthcare professionals in combination with patients, of course, can do many searches, and I've mentioned just 3 here, but I think when we start thinking about this, we can think of innumerable number of use cases or examples. The context perhaps of a patient planning a pregnancy, a patient perhaps who has a certain intolerance, or for OTC medicines, where it has been mentioned that maybe there is less interaction or the interaction with the healthcare professional is different. It would be possible to do targeted searches of the electronic product information and then, together with consultation from the healthcare professional, make an informed treatment decision. From the point of view of the regulator and the companies, there are efficiencies to be gained in the regulatory process. And I have some examples here, but I think there are additional efficiencies along the same lines. Certainly, they can be examples such as administrative changes to the product information, such as a transfer of a marketing authorization or changing address of a marketing authorization holder. Or you can imagine a change to a reference medicine, a new warning on a reference medicine that also affects perhaps several generics on the market, or as we have in EMA, the Article 31 referrals, where there are new changes to the PI introduced. In an EPI system, this could be informed to the regulator by the marketing authorization holder one time, and then the change could be implemented and cascaded throughout all the relevant annexes of the PI, and could also be flagged for updating or changed in the PI of other medicines which are relevant, such as, for example, perhaps medicines with the same active substance or generic versions of the same medicine. And these systems will facilitate the provision of harmonized, up-to-date product information to patients and healthcare professionals. So I just wanted to give to you, I know that a lot of this is a repetition, but it's so that we will start to initiate our thinking along the lines of the use cases and features that we consider higher and lower priority and what are important. And this whole process would be the compiling of requirements for a development of a common standard. The next step would be identifying and assessing the candidate standards, and indeed, do we need to develop standards in certain areas to fulfill the use cases? And once a common standard is identified, it needs to be documented in open catalogs and implementation guides. And these are the steps we feel towards implementation of the common standard. Finally, I would just like to thank the NCA representatives and industry task force representatives who, for their very fruitful discussions and contributions to the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Libby, for that very clear presentation. I think we have about 5-10 minutes to pause here for questions. If anyone has any questions or comments on what's just been presented. Yes, Peter.
Many thanks, Peter Bachmann from the Bee Farm. And many thanks for presenting the next cathedral. Sorry to say this. For me, there are two cases, the standards and the use cases. And if we are saying it's a standard, it's open source, we have an API, that's fine. Because what I hear is still the idea we can control information in the internet. And I think that is what we can forget. This proposal was even going to the direction we build a European app on product information. And I think there are a lot of other companies out in the wild world which are much more better than we. I think we should concentrate on our core business, what we have to do, which means a structure, a common standard, where others can rely on it. But the idea is that we can control what others are doing with the data. It's not even possible today. So somebody can scan in a PDF, do something with it, publish it in an electronic way. We have no control. So please, can we go back to the core, what we have to do? And then perhaps in some years we see a nice cathedral. But we have to start with the core. Sorry for this.
Actually, we 100% agree. And in fact, what we wanted to do with describing the use cases was just that we need to keep in mind the high priority use cases. But in fact, what we see as our role is exactly as you have said, creating a common standard and providing the information in that standard. In fact, many of the other use cases, while we obviously must keep them in mind to ensure that they're enabled when we're creating the standard, we see applications will be created by third parties. We don't see that EMA will create the only phone app. In fact, this is not part of what we're considering. We want to have the information open, available in a usable standard that others can then take, patient organizations, entrepreneurs, and companies and so on, and create the apps that are suitable for them. Certainly, there are patient organizations who would have a particular app and use case and be only interested in a certain subgroup of medicines. But we need to keep, when we're developing the standard, however, we need to know what we want to try and enable when we develop the standard. What we would see as the way forward would be describe the use cases and the features that are the highest priority and work towards fulfilling those use cases. I do agree that we don't want to fulfill every use case and every single feature, because if we go for trying to create a standard that can do everything, then I agree we may never get there. But what we did, and I did want to stress at the beginning, that what we only wanted to do with this discussion group was to begin thinking in that direction, but we have not. And we would have to do with stakeholder consultation, the prioritization about which are the features and which are the use cases which are the highest priority.
Yeah, and just to add on what Libby was saying, I do think it's very important also to bear in mind the use cases in terms of building the business case to prioritize this vis-a-vis other telematics projects as well. So it is very important that we start to concretely see how useful this will be. Peter, you wanted to come back on that?
Because if we have this in mind about which time horizon we are speaking, the normal IT circle is less than half a year. Are we now starting to speak about a process which is taking 2 years, 3 years? And to be quite honest, then we don't have to start. So we need something very quick to start. And as I said, the normal IT circles are half a year.
Yeah, I mean, Peter, we haven't gone into the details of planning and timing here, but we have taken home the very strong message that came out this morning about keeping our feet on the ground and managing deliverables in timeframes. So that's something that we will take out of this workshop. And as you said very clearly this morning, it is learnings that we have had from other projects in the past. So we will be breaking it down into clear deliverables in reasonable timeframes. Pa, you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I have minor questions. Under features, data is stating provide batch-specific information. I think that today for product information, we don't have batch-specific information. Is this something extra that you would like the industry to deliver?
What we are mean by that is that if a new safety, just to give a scenario, if a new piece of safety information occurs about an active substance, this then would be applicable to all EPI. But it could be that if an excipient has been removed from a certain medicine, that medicines on the shelf will still have the excipient and new medicines will not have the excipient. So there are cases where there would be 2 EPI that would be correct for one, or multiple EPI that would be correct for one medicine at the same time. So that in that feature, we would have a way of associating the correct EPI with the correct medicine.
Yes. Theo?
Thank you. I'd like to comment on the idea of one of the additional efficiencies was said to be readability testing. And as the keeper of the faith with the shortcomings report, I thought I would point out that one of the key findings of the shortcomings report was to strengthen the input of patients in the testing of the information. So I would be concerned if there was going to be some dilution of that input. And another point about user testing, it of course looks at both content and design and layout. So whether people can understand the information, but can they find it? Now, if we continue to user test the hard copy, then we will still be testing the understandability, but the design and layout will be very different. So we won't be testing the findability, which is crucial. So I think we need to think carefully about how we take forward readability testing, consultation with target patient groups as it's defined in the legislation as we go forward.
Of course, user testing is a very, very critical, important part of any project, and absolutely, I do agree with you. All the different aspects would need to be user tested throughout a project.
Please.
I just want to add one comment which is also relevant for coming session, which will go through the key principles. I want to repeat the upstream and downstream categorization. So I see the comment from Peter and the other comment about user testing. Well, these are basically can be in the part of downstream. And then I understand that I understand, Elizabeth, that we should have an eye on it and see where we go. That will be the final goal. We want to reach the top of the mountain, but that's not what we are going to do now, and that's exactly what Peter was saying. I'm now thinking about a way we sometimes do business, and that's we call it Scrum. I don't know if people here are familiar with that. That means that you have a final goal and you have it in your mind in the whole process. But then when you start doing it, you start with a goal which is achievable within, let's say, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year. But then, of course, you have the final goal in your in your mind. So that's also my suggestion, that don't let the final goal deceive you somehow on seeing that what we should do now. We are not going to reach the Everest in next next week, but we are going to start climbing. And that's what we are going to do. And please, when we go also through these key principles, have in your mind the upstream, downstream groups categorization.
Okay, thanks. That makes, okay, 2 last questions, then we're going to move on to the key principles. Please, Gunilla.
Okay, I have a question on approval of structured data. Because if we think that we should do what we are good at doing, then the medical agencies really should approve structured data. So is it in the regulatory strategy for EMA for the coming 5 years? I saw there was a new plan, but I didn't have the time to read it yet.
I can comment on it, but that's part of what we are going to discussing today, and we want to set up the vision how electronic information should be implemented, in the sense that we are offering the possibility for those authorities which are willing to do, to have it from the submission point, which means that it should be throughout the assessment used like that. And I think in discussions we have agreed this should be the ultimate goal, where everybody shares this, because this will be more efficient. However, coming back to the point from Peter, I think if we impose that in every authority from the very beginning, we may struggle to implement it, because not everybody is, or not every authority is ready to do that immediately. That's why we are proposing a flexible approach by which, little by little, the ultimate vision is everyone having electronic information from the very beginning.
And coming to your question about whether it's specifically in the plan, which will be released in December for consultation, it's not specifically, but then it's part of the action plan per se, so it's not in the regulatory science strategy. One more question, I think, from UEMO. Yes, please, Dr. McCarthy.
Thank you, Mary McCarthy, UEMO. This has been a really interesting discussion, and it's especially valuable to hear what other nations are doing, and also what works, or more importantly, what doesn't work. Because in a way, we learn more from our mistakes than we learn from our successes. I agree that patients need to be involved, but doctors should also, since they're the ones who are the prescribers. And I noted in George Lang's consortium that doctors were conspicuously absent, and I wondered why. I'm wary of alert systems, and that's the one thing that keeps coming up. Oh, we're going to alert you to side effects. And I do that because of practical reasons. We have alert systems in general practice, obviously, especially when we're prescribing. So when I'm adding another hypotensive to this patient whose blood pressure just won't come down, it flashes up in red, blood pressure may be lowered. Be aware of this. And the problem with this is you get so used to the alerts that you stop regarding them, and overuse diminishes their effectiveness. So I think this needs to be flagged up so that care is taken about what alerts you put up, and make sure they're really priority ones. Because data is important, but it does depend not just on what is entered, but who is entering it, which is why with Giovanni's presentation, I'm slightly concerned about the idea of my treatment, my health information, my health education. In the health information, is this the doctor putting in the data, or is it the patient putting in the data? Because it might be slightly different. Thank you.
Giovanni, do you want to comment on that? I don't know where. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, within within the scope of the project, we would envisage the need to actually define what those sources could be, because we fully agree with the point that not all information is created equal. The expectation would be that we would have, through the involvement of the various stakeholders, an exercise to actually map out what those would be, which will be brought into that digital solution where they'd be available for reference.
Thank you. I only speak because I know that the amount of alcohol my patients tell me they drink is not necessarily what they do.
That I can't comment on.
Thank you. We're going to wrap up there on the questions on the standard, and I think we're going to move now into the key principles so we have time to run through them. So I hand over to Zaid to chair this part of the session.
Thank you very much, Melanie, also for inviting me to take part today. It's a real pleasure. So, ladies and gentlemen, I actually have the pleasure to introduce Juan. I know Juan doesn't need any introduction, but he is our head of public engagement, and he is also the person, together with Alexios Karlatos, that have been leading the survey, as well as the analysis of the survey results, in close collaboration, obviously, with the European Commission and the heads of medicines agencies. And the outcome of this collaboration has been or is a set of proposed key principles, and that's the ones that we would like to run through today. And you will find that these draft key principles will be actually absolutely critical to establish on our path to an EPI. And not only on our path to EPI, but actually also in the much wider sense in enabling this digital transformation of the healthcare system that has been also mentioned earlier. So the idea of this part of the session is really to present principle by principle and actually provide you all with an opportunity to support or to express concern, or even to come up maybe with additional elements that you see fit for integration in the key principles. So I would suggest, Juan, go with the first one.
Thank you very much, Said. And indeed, I think we hope to be able to progress with these key principles, which in a way contains a lot of concept and information that came up during the discussion today, which in a way is quite reassuring. So this you have seen before, but that's again the way that we have done this work and the way we have came up with these key principles. And in a way, I will try to briefly describe how we gather all this data. So the basis for the data was the survey that we launched, the EU survey and the international survey that Rosa presented before. And we use that as a basis for the analysis. For the analysis, not only we use this data, we use the outcome of the survey, but we also try to search and to make a proper analysis of all the information and all other initiatives that we are aware are going on. So everything was collated in a way, and it was discussed further in a meeting with that HMA group kindly hosted in Madrid in July. And I think one of the key elements for success of this meeting is that we already incorporated the stakeholders at the time, and we discussed with them the outcome of the findings. We had the Commission there, we have definitely HMA, but we have industry, patients, consumers, healthcare professionals, and academia. And I think this discussion was critical to a little bit shape and see the emerging areas where these key principles were coming. So we went to go for further consultation, and I think we involved, for example, the working parties here at the EMA with patients, consumers. We further discussed with HMA and in different forums. And I think we are now in the workshop where we are presenting the key principles discussed with all groups which are here represented, and hopefully we can agree on them. And then this draft that we can agree can be put for public consultation so that we can ensure that everyone has the opportunity to comment on it so that they are robust enough to serve for implementing it afterwards. So the way that we have analyzed the data in a way mirrors very much the structure of this workshop. We tried to focus first on the needs of stakeholders based on the information we had, the needs and the concerns, the challenges, and also the opportunities that electronic formats for product information could bring. We try to put all that in the current context where we identify the different initiatives, and then we try to a little bit see where we want to achieve, and very much looking for a very pragmatic point of view which replicate to these comments we are receiving that we have to avoid building a cathedral. So Just to go through all the sources of information for this analysis is the results of the mapping. There was also the QRD survey, which in a way the scope of it was overlapping this initiative as well. So it was very useful to have this integrated into the full analysis. We had the results of the international mapping, which in a way confirms the trend at its international level and in other regions to go digital in the way that they want to display information. Discussions have been held at HMA, but also in other forums at EMA, for example, EU Telematic Board, to ensure that IT colleagues are kept up to date of this progress, and of course with the European Commission. Feedback from patients and consumers through the working parties. We have integrated interesting feedback and requests that we have from real life evaluation from the public hearings, where there was specific request for this kind of technology in order to support the minimization measures that were proposed for safety concerns, specifically in the area of valproate. And also during EMA stakeholders meetings, also product related, which were not only feedback, but real cases where we can identify the needs for these solutions in a way. Feedback from member states has been sought as well in the context of CNDH. The Pharmaceutical Committee, the European Commission's Pharmaceutical Committee has also been kept up to date, as well as the IT Directors Group. So, and then in addition, the virtual discussions on electronic standard that Libby presented before, which has a little bit more on the technical aspect to complement all the picture. So now I think these are the key points which emerge, and I think you have received, all of you, very preliminary draft versions of these key principles. And we thought it was interesting and important to share with all of you because it can really help shaping the discussions that maybe it's simple concepts but can be complicated when we are not a little bit aware of all the background. So hopefully this was helpful. And the idea is that we will display on the slides key principle by key principles, and then we can discuss all together. So again, all the information is in your package and in your document. This is just a very abridged version of each key principle. The first one was that it was important, and when we started working on this, it was clear from the very beginning that without an agreed definition is very difficult, because I think electronic product information can be anything and can be different concepts from different people. So the way that after discussing and getting all the analysis, we try to define is that is authorized statutory product information for medicines, which of course includes the SMPC, package leaflet, labeling, and Annex 2, which is in an organized format created using the common EU electronic standard. It is adapted for electronic handling and allows dissemination via web, e-platforms, and print. And when we talk about organized formats, we refer to format which is suitable for electronic handling and includes structured elements, which is fixed headings and vocabularies, and some unstructured elements, which are free text. So I think it's up for comments, this definition.
Yes, thank you, Juan. So basically, any term, also EPI, could be understood differently depending on the stakeholder involved, if you like. So the definition proposed here is for a specific collaboration that has been explained throughout the day. Are there any comments or suggestions from the audience? Please, yes.
Hello, Kim Sherwood from the Swedish Medical Products Agency. I'm a little bit concerned about the term Annex 2. Either people might do not understand what's included, and if there is some conditions included, some reference in Annex 2, should that as well be included? So I propose to describe what Annex 2 is, or just describe in general terms, and then it could be valid also for the DCP, MRP procedures. They don't have the Annex 2, but they have a similar part in the overview report.
Yes, I think it's a valid comment. We can do that. The description you see was just to make sure what is the definition, what is comprised by product information annexes. Maybe we can further specify what exactly is Annex 2, but we take your point.
It's a valid point. In a way, the Annex 1, Annex 2, and so on is not mentioned. So I think that's a good comment. Yes, please.
Well, you're thinking about further specifying it. but even you can less specifying it. Why not saying that SMPC package leaflet, etc., or or saying nothing? It's just between the brackets. It's not really part of the definition. So we can just take the more an approach that's more complicated. Well, upon you, where I don't see a reason to go into such details for something which is between the brackets.
Yeah, maybe Alexios wants to elaborate, but obviously it does include risk minimization measures as well in some cases. So maybe Alexios?
We thought it was considered important to make sure what is product information, at least from a regulatory point of view, that the 4 parts that we are talking about are the specific ones. So there's no misunderstanding what is covered by product information, because it could be understood as something else. So from a regulatory point of view, we wanted to be clear.
But do we have definition of product information elsewhere? If we do have a definition for product information, you can just refer to that definition and not necessarily defining it here in this key principle.
Yeah, I don't think that there is a definition of product information, but talking within our framework and environment, this is what we are working with. It's these 4 annexes. So we thought for clarity, it's important that we specify them and we make specific reference. What are these documents?
And exactly for that, sorry to take some time, but exactly for that reason that you think there is no definition at the moment, if we try to define it here, it may not be the best definition, and maybe after a short time someone says this is not the best definition. So I think we are not here trying to define product information in this key principle. We are going to define EPI. So please don't try to define product information. Leave it open. So when somewhere else a definition comes, it's just relevant. But if we find it here, then we'll contradict with the official definition if somewhere exists.
I think also maybe going back to the discussions to come up with this proposal, it's important as well that at the beginning there was a lot of, not confusion, but a lot of concerns by many other stakeholders to say, you are talking about product information, but what exactly are you talking about? I think there was a lot of hesitancy to really support a project which could consider that information can be anything. And it is quite reassuring that whenever someone approaches to electronic product information, we exactly define what kind of information we are talking about. So we can play, as you say, to make it more friendly and to express it in a better way, or in a way which doesn't create confusion. But I think it's important we really are specific and precise on what are we talking about, because otherwise it can create a lot of confusion.
Sorry, last point, especially because we are talking about authorized and statutory. This is what is authorized and statutory, is these 4 documents, nothing else.
Oh, there's many agencies.
So, Gesine Bejeur, Interassociation Task Force. So in my presentation, I spoke about regulatory approved documents, and what we're missing here are quite some important documents that are written already in lay language. So you have the lay summary of the European Public Assessment Report. You have the lay summaries of risk management plans. You have the lay summaries of clinical trial reports in future. So there are documents that may be really of great use for patients and citizens. So I'm wondering how we could include these documents and any other future document that might come up in future regulations.
I think hopefully it has been covered in Liv's presentation, because as you say, there is a lot of information which is specific for patients and which in a way is also covered under regulatory authorities. But that's not exactly what we define as electronic product information. That's why we said that this electronic product information could contain links to other information which may be of much relevance, such as the EPI summary, such as summaries of clinical trials, etc. But that's not part of the definition. So we allow the possibility to link, and this is, again, we can develop this further and to make it even more informative, more access, etc. But I think it's not part of the core definition we are proposing. And I think we need to be precise at the beginning, and afterwards we can develop further. But otherwise, I think we can struggle.
Further, please.
Yes, well, I agree. It's, again, important to go back to the focus. And what I do agree with is that by defining SMPC and package leaflet is that we do this as well for the patients as for the HCPs. So either you leave it out and only call it product information, or you mention all the documents that you mean with product information. And I agree that it is package leaflet, SMPC labeling, and risk materials.
I think we agree, and we will.
Just to add, you also have to bear in mind that we're planning to roll this out for centrally authorized products and products authorized at national level. And we can take the comment and reflect, but I do think we need to bear in mind that we need to start somewhere, and then it could be build upon it. So it comes back to the point about starting small as a first step.
I have a question. Is this document supposed to be published for lay people as well?
Yes, I mean it's
because then I
public
would suggest,
consultation.
might it be possible to include on the first page a list of abbreviations, because this is really, that would be very handy for all these abbreviations you use. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, we have quite a reputation.
I also have a question. I haven't seen anywhere safety and data protection. I think that this website, this system is extremely important because of the information contained. And if anything happens, we are talking about, something extremely important. So safety and data protection, is it anywhere provided?
It comes later. We're just on the number one, which is the definition at the moment, but it does come later. And it was also touched on in Libby's presentation. So yes, we have noted it down as a really important element that we won't lose sight of.
Hi, Samaka Sabontama from Malta. Just a quick comment. If this, and I imagine that you are planning to release this for public consultation at the earliest, this definition with the brackets would help to make people in the regulatory field understand that what you're trying to link. So I would definitely not remove the SMPC package leaflet labeling. And Annex 2, I fully agree with Kim. That should be, in brief, lay terms, defined as to what that means. But I would not remove what that includes, because if we're talking about authorized product information, currently anyone within a regulatory agency will understand just those. So at least for now, for a transitional period, let's leave things with a clear bridge between the current and the future. Then if things evolve, we get to the chip in the head stage, then we'll redefine that. But currently, I think that is needed. Otherwise, if we leave it too open, it will scare off people who think, okay, we're plonking everything in it, and it would defeat the purpose, I think. Thanks.
I think we totally agree with the last statement as well. Are there further questions? Then we would move on to number 2. Juan?
So, second principle is the common EU electronic standard, and we move at the very beginning of all the key principles because we feel is really relevant, and it again repeats what had been said before, specifically on Libby's presentation. This is the definition which is proposed, is that the electronic product information, including for all medicines, centrally and national authorized, will be created using a common standard. A common standard refers to technical features, which is markup language, control vocabularies, and interoperability specifications, which is agreed by everyone, by regulators, but also stakeholders. So it's important standard to generate the EPI and that it fulfills all the agreed key principles. And these are the features that Libby presented before. So again, the rationale is what we had before, but I think the implication again is the relevance that this is the first step and the prerequisite for implementation of EPI. If we are not able to agree on a common standard as a first step, nothing can be done and nothing will be done. That's why we have put at the beginning, because it's maybe the essential step to be able to allow national authorities and everyone to start working on it. And even if we are proposing different speeds of implementation by different players, it will still allow full harmonization in the end. So I think we are not again saying anything new, but open for questions and comments.
Yes, indeed. Any suggestions or different proposals from the audience? Yes, please.
Hi, Kim Sherwood again. I'm concerned about the word generate. Would people think that this is create during the assessment process, or do they interpret this as approved product information transferred into the tool? Should we be more specific, or is it your intention to be unspecific about that?
If you don't mind, it comes later under the process governance in the following key principles, so we can deal with it later. But I think that the proposal is that it foresees both. So that, again, for those member states who are ready, can use it from the very beginning. The ones that are not ready, at least can use the tool to convert it. They can have a normal assessment in Word or PDF, and then at the end of the assessment, a tool will convert to electronic format and just publish on the website. Also, a tool within is necessary because there are already approved products that may need to be converted in order to ensure that at the end, all medicines which are approved in Europe has information in electronic format. But we will come back to this later.
There was another question somewhere. Yes, please.
Yeah, and my comment on that would be, I think it's about the discussion we had, the church and the cathedral again, and I think there is a common understanding that controlled vocabularies and the interoperability specifications are an integral part of the cathedral. And my question is, would it be helpful that we write in the definition of the E standard really define sort of a framework, that it is very clear that the availability of the controlled vocabularies and the interoperability standards may not really impede the implementation, so that we could add something like that. So
I think definitely we can do that. In a way, I think we could even distinguish between selecting the standard and developing. There is a need to further work on it in order to make it. So I think we can make that distinction. It can help, definitely.
However, we do have, I think, at the moment, a good opportunity in timing-wise because of the SPORE project. And we are in a much, much better position today than we were, for example, in previous efforts, because there are already processes ongoing to define terminologies, and we can take advantage of that in the EPI project. So, but however, at the same time, we definitely do accept iterative and agile approach where we would not expect to have absolutely everything implemented, but we may be able to implement at some level.
Yes, I think Francesco Peñaranda, you wanted to intervene?
Yes, it's only to confirm one point. In SPORE, we have not developed everything. We have a number of control vocabularies available. And I agree that it shouldn't impede the future. So the principle should be the control vocabularies when available. So if it's something that we will develop in the future, it will be integrated in the future also. But the control vocabularies, if available, like now, the ones we have for references, has to be used. And basically, they are used in many regulatory processes.
I think it's important to state that this is going to be implemented step by step, so no obligation at the very beginning to use. SPORE is part of the IDMP, but IDMP is wider than SPORE, and there are other vocabularies and dictionaries outside the regulatory field that can be used. It's also important to understand for everyone that there is no any software behind this definition. So we are just speaking about the so don't think on any other thing. We are not speaking on that. And it should be, I mean, I repeat, flexible, and I know that is later, flexible and workable step by step. I think it is important to understand this definition.
Yes, just so you are right, but at a certain point of time, we have to agree on the foundations. For example, for IDMP case, there is the ISO 11239 that actually define a part of it. And it is a terminology together with the units of measurements and the other part of the layers that build actually all these things. Of course, when it is available, but people have to know what is coming, how it has been developed, and how you can participate and make it work. Yeah, the foundation is there. It's better to avoid. It is how the colleague, Peter said about the cathedral. But Peter, for the cathedral, we must have faith. Yeah, there is the faith there. We're talking about the faith. The second is that actually, yes, we have a standard like the XML, and as we change some talks with my colleague Nick Halsey here, for the comments we did before about this, the docx is actually a zip file with XML files inside. So the technology is there. And the other stuff is that there are initiatives in the international part. It's not only us and in Europe, it's also how we collaborate and exchange information with our stakeholders internationally. For example, with FDA or with other regions, or with Japan, with Australia, with China. And you must have a framework that can accommodate that. To give you an example, at this moment and in the next a few months, because of the healthcare use cases, clinical decision support systems, in FHIR and HL7, there are 3 different projects actually who claim the medication approach in order to provide feedback to healthcare world. And now there is an umbrella project that is going in order to identify the common elements, and based on that we shall build the other infrastructure. And all this actually building is consistent again on the same foundation. Same model, same terminology, and same quality standard. So the API is just an output, a deliverable for that. And this is why the colleagues are trying to have consensus here at the table, because this is what happened. If we do something independently, for example, we have an idea. All ideas are better than every standard in the world. This is what our experience has shown. In our house, in our home, there is no standard. We are responsible to do whatever we like, the way we like, the time we like. But when we go outside to communicate with the other people around us in the organization, we have to agree on this standard. And now the time is the correct one, as Elizabeth said, because something that the international community tries to do years now, the last 15 years, starting from pharmacovigilance, but also for the other use cases regarding the life cycle management, has been done. And this is actually the IDMP and the combined actually standards around it, which actually came as a healthcare use case in our world. Yeah.
Yes, please. I fully agree, but to support one thing that has been mentioned before, we cannot wait for couple of hours of years until everything is organized. So we need to start very simple at the very beginning. It's not about, I mean, Peter has remarked previously, we need to act in a very short time.
Thank you. I had another gentleman there, please.
Hello, it's Rüdiger Faust from IATF. I agree, we need to work urgently on those standards for the output as well as for the creation of the information. We have seen today a lot of very good examples of all the projects, initiatives that are going on. All work with XML, but different standards. So we have already good sources, but they are not connected. And this is what we really need to achieve in the future objective, and provides a multilingual context, as you mentioned in your key principles. So we need to start now and not try to deliver 29 or 27 different standards for every single initiative, and it complicates the flow of the information. We would like to have it easier with access and up to speed or up to date and speedy access for patients.
Thank you very much for summarizing in a way what is needed in terms of the EU common standard. Is there further? Shall we move to the next? Yeah, Juan?
Yes, thank you very much. So the third key principle goes back to the main benefits that electronic product information will bring. And I think, again, is expanding access to information as a public health imperative. And I think we have tried to define the three main points that we expect to gain. One, this is implemented. The first is that it will expand the dissemination of unbiased, up-to-date, regulatory validated product information for all medicines in the EU. And I think we have this morning and this afternoon a lot of demonstrations why this is happening. And again, if we don't act quickly, we may risk losing the possibility of patients and healthcare professionals to get access to this information in a way. The second is that we will support the provision of the latest safety information in an immediate manner. And we have again seen examples how this can be done. And also is that the structured nature of EPI offers the opportunities to better tailor the product information that individual patients needs. And then I think we have been seeing very often complaints that the package leaflet is too long. So we have the possibility to still provide the full and the comprehensive information to the patients, but at the same time, it offers the opportunity to extract immediately the information that everyone needs or needs to know according to their other information available. So any comments on this?
So I think here this is definitely a key principle that goes at the core, I think, in terms of public health ambition for the whole initiative. So I think it's important to see if there is agreement. Is there any comments from? Yes, please, Jessina.
So, Gesine Bejeur again. So one word there, it's not only safety information. I mean, we have, in particular in Germany, we have lots of discussions about conditional marketing authorization. So there might be as well very important other information. Let's say, for example, that there's now proof that the conditional marketing authorization is now full authorization. So if we could agree on saying that it's updating information, that would be really great.
Oh, I think that's an easy one to agree on. I think the idea is an enhanced information, whether it's on benefits and safety. I think safety is more natural maybe to come up because that's when you know that there is something to communicate, but you're absolutely right. Fulfillment of conditioning and conditional approval is absolutely key as well. Please, there is...
There's one here, Theo,
Hi.
and then
Theo, and
then the lady.
Hi, it's Angela Pindoria from Medicines for Europe, representing the generic companies. I think one of the concerns here, or one of the things we need to emphasize, is what do we mean by latest information? So using the term approved or current approved regulatory product information just sets the context of what we're working with. And I think there's also a sentence within the implications, paragraph 2, where you mentioned that EPI will rapidly and continually update as soon as changes are made to the SMPC and the pill, but really that should be not the changes as such, because there is a regulatory process that goes into place, but more focusing on the approval aspect.
Yes, I think we could reiterate it here, but it's true that in the definition it was explicitly mentioning that it's authorized information. So, but I think there is a merit to clarify it further in this sentence. Yes, please, Theo.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about what we mean by tailor or tailoring. One of the opportunities the EPI could bring is that we could introduce a key information section at the beginning of the patient leaflet. And so somebody would have to decide which pieces of information in that leaflet were inserted into the key information section. So would that be regarded as being outside of this initiative or inside in terms of it being the same information?
Alexios, please.
Theo, the key information section is part of a separate recommendation that will be taken care after that one. So we will deal with it as a standalone item. It's one of the recommendations of the report that we have identified as a separate item, and it will be taken care separately.
Maybe just to clarify that that wasn't exactly the intention of this paragraph, and maybe we need to rephrase to make it clear. One thing is the key information, which applies to everyone, but when we talk about tailor, we mean that what is critical for one person may not necessarily be critical for another one. And I think the digital nature, the structured nature of this information may be able to highlight the information that this person has because the app you are using have information of other medications, so it can tackle interactions. Or a good example who came up again, as I said before, during the public hearing is that, for example, in the case of the valproate, the information is on the package leaflet, but for different reasons, the women who were exposed to this medication didn't read the package leaflet and didn't read this critical information. So how to ensure digital technology allows that no women taking this medication goes without having an alert or something which tells them you have to be careful, there is a risk of damaging your baby if you take this medication while pregnancy. So this is an example that it may not apply to another person, but this to this one.
Olga, you would like to compliment?
Just, also, in relation to the clarification, another element about this key information, because there was a separate discussion about, the utility of such separate section on key information, and it was actually a particular advice that it was actually checked with a study, from the Commission before the Commission report, and actually one of the findings of the study it was that we do not have enough evidence yet to go into kind of a key information section. And one of the recommendations in the report it is we need more evidence, more testing, within the QRT template with patients, with healthcare professionals to put this evidence before considering. So I think that, it's good to clarify because, there is some expectation on that end that, we are talking about two different things, yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Further, please.
Hi, it's Emma again. Following the example that you specifically mentioned about valproate, so eventually are we thinking about the possibility that a user would need to be identified as being female, taking this medicine? I'm trying to find a link. So you're going to have that personalization at some point in time in the process. Because let me give you an example. Because perhaps rightly so, you pointed out women were not finding that information in the package leaflet. But let's go a step back. Were the healthcare professionals, and I'm a healthcare professional, so I'm throwing this onto myself as well, were they pushing out the message as strongly as they should have had? What if you have a particular case that a clinician still thinks that the patient requires, for example, valproate? And the end user is, inserted details, she's female, childbearing age, blah, 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 blah. And the end result is that you get a big alert. Listen, you shouldn't be taking this. What happens at that point in time?
Yeah, maybe we are going to complex examples and discussions here. I think, again, we are talking about the cathedral. Maybe it's true that we are looking at the future and we are looking maybe too far. I think the idea of electronic product information is that it has the potential in the future to interact with e-prescription, with the e-electronic health records, etc. And then all these interactions allows maybe, for the example that I mentioned, where you have the information of a patient all together in electronic format and everything interacts. So there it comes from there. In the case of valproate, the problem there is that even the healthcare professional sometimes was not fully aware of the risks. So it's not a problem of that the information which was already in the product information and the SMPC was there. The measures were right, but the measures didn't go through the target people. And the point and the message was that electronic formats may allow maybe this dissemination to target really the people who needed to know to ensure that the medication was used safely. It's just an example to illustrate, but of course, we enter into difficult discussion.
However, just to reinforce, this is why we discuss interoperability, because of interoperability with electronic health records and e-prescribing systems and so on.
Peter and then Cesar.
Thank you. No, I think we need to step a little step back, because the idea is to give out the complete information. Then the second step is who is outside the world, who is willing to create some apps or whatever, where a patient has to give in the information, I am 30, I am female, I only have one hand or whatever, and then this has to interact. But it's the second step. So our idea is we give out the complete information as it is in a structured way. And then the second one is who is personalizing it, who would like to personalize it. But that's something which we cannot control. So our task is to give the complete, approved information. So that's a trusted point. That's a trusted information, which is the basis of further work up on it. And I think that's, again, with downstream, upstream.
I think Cesar and then also Viorica first.
No, a quick comment. It's just not to lose the focus on what we are discussing. I mean, for sure, there are a lot of possibilities. Some of them will be dependent on the data protection regulation or so on. But this is not the problem right now. I mean, the problem right now is how we agree in a common standard and just so that this can be used in the future, for sure, in a good ways, in a good way, probably also in a bad way. But it's not guilty, the EU common standard for that would be in the future who is using this information. And we provide everyday information to, I can imagine that having this information in a semi-structured way is going to be dangerous for anyone. What can be dangerous in the future is the use that is done with this for not only regulators, I mean, probably outside the regulators, and again, put the focus on the common principle and the key standard, and because otherwise it's very easy to get lost in the discussion.
Yes, thank you for reinforcing this point, Viorica.
Availability of medication represents one of the most important needs for a patient. Will this information be provided here somewhere? Because we are talking about the medicine, and particularly in the context of access to medication, because there are places where novel treatments are easily accessible and places where only substitutes or medication with this active substance. But out of several medication, one of them has proven to be the most efficient. So will you have this kind of information provided under this principle? Thank you.
Just we've got already quite a number of proposals for a future workshop, isn't it? Because it's the expansion of the idea that which is beautiful in a way. I don't know if someone wants to react to the actual point or.
Yeah, I think it touches upon another issue. It's true. I mean, we are talking about access to information, and then you focus more on access to medication. There was recently a workshop on shortages and availability, and to make the link, the discussion about the electronic standards came up as a way that they can support maybe certain aspects of this. But I think it's another discussion that, of course, we have to tackle in another forum.
Yes. I agree with Juan. Things are getting complicated. Let's keep things simple. And again, it's again about upstream, downstream. Look at these three statements. The first statement is saying why it's a priority. Okay, then it's good to say that, but you can even say that in the introduction of this document. Second statement is about EPI will support something in future. Third one, EPI will offer something in future. As I see the comments from other people, now it starts a lot of confusion. Okay, and what about that? What about that? These are all downstream. So, first statement is more useful as an introduction. Second and third, they are both downstream. And if you are going to talk about downstream, then There is no limit. You can go on and on and on. Why we have two? You can have put the third one. You can put say about something about shortage. You can say something about updates. You can say something about a personalized way. So the whole key principle is a very important one, but I suggest to put it as an introduction to the document and not as a key principle by itself.
Yeah, we will reflect. Juan, do you want to react?
I think, yeah, I mean, in a way, what we have to clarify is that this is, as you say, maybe the downstream or the dissemination part. I don't think so we are going to put the weight we are going to implement these elements, because it's once this is one electronic product information is implemented, then you can make these benefits. But I think it's important that we define it, because this is the ultimate goal. This is the ultimate benefit that we want the patients and the healthcare professionals to have. So it's fine to have it in the introduction, but I think, again, for me, is one of the reasons why we want to implement that. And we cannot lose this focus, because this is why we think, in the end of the day, will give benefit to the system. If we focus very much on the process, which I think maybe is what we have to discuss afterwards on how to implement, we may lose a little bit the insight of why we are doing it. So we can put it different places of the document, but it's critical.
Yeah, so we'll reflect further on the point made. Yes. One more intervention, please.
I'm Gergő Németh from Hungary, and I represent the payers. Thank you very much for the invitation here. And so I have a question to you, because it's not clear for me if there is an intention that the electronic product information will be linked to the serial numbers that will be introduced under the Falsified Medicines Directive. Could you explain what is your position on this? Because I think it would improve patients' access to information very much.
Definitely. I mean, Livy can complement, but definitely this is one of the possibilities that we offer. And again, we don't need to commit to that, because we need to build step by step. But you have identified one of the potential benefits that it can bring. So we can make reference in the document clearly.
Yeah. Then I would propose that we...
The fourth principle, and again, I hope that it doesn't create confusion, because it goes in the same direction. It tries to describe some of the benefits that we believe electronic standards will bring, and which is that it will, and this is not new, we have seen a lot of examples, it will allow this information to be more accessible to everyone, depending on their needs, and specifically for patients with some print impairments, such as blind or partially sight people, or those even with low literacy levels. So again, this is nothing new to what we have listened today, and is one of the benefits that we expect the system will bring.
Yes, also it's not the only initiative that could be done to expand accessibility, but are there any further ideas in this respect, or concerns, please?
Well, once again, as Juan said, it's in the same category. So again, here we are saying how it can be used in dissemination part. So and of course here we have separate legislation for. We have the WCAG, we have the Web Content Accessibility Guideline, which is from side of European United Nations, from side of European Union. So we have separate legislations for that. So that's not necessarily a key principle for EPI. And again, as you already said, this is again in the same category of saying what are the possibilities that will follow the EPI. So, okay, personally, this is my advice. I would say don't put it as a key principle. But if you don't want to listen to me, then at least put everything under one single key principle that says what are the possible advantages that we know for at this moment. Maybe in future there are more advantages, new advantages that we cannot even imagine, but now in one key principle, we try to say what we already think or imagine, and then you can put everything under that. So it will be 3.1, 3.2, just subcategories of that single key principle. Maybe that's more logical way to present it.
I think we can certainly reflect on the point you've made, and we also have to bear in mind that indeed these key principles will be read cold by people who aren't familiar with the regulatory world, product information, and they'll start by saying, oh, but we want the paper, and they feel under threat. So we have to balance showcasing some of the benefits in simple terms, but we can certainly reflect on how we present that optimally and simply.
Kim, please.
Just a comment to what you said. There is one important difference. Due to the legislation, it's up to the company to provide accessible formats. And as I interpret this key principle is that now the agency could provide that format. So for me, it's important to keep this.
I just wanted to mention that this specific element is also directly linked to the Commission's report, because there was a very clear reference to people with elderly and partial sighted. So I think we wanted to make a very clear link to what was the initial deliverable of the Commission's report in this respect.
Yes, please. Just.
So it's me again, Gesine. So while the accessibility for people with visual impairments is technology, there's one point here. Those with low literacy levels means then we would need other contents. So I don't know if this is intended here, and because we were speaking about the approved labels in the beginning, and here we speak about low literacy levels, which would mean easy language, which is another content then.
That's a valid point. Is there any comment, Libby?
Yeah, I agree that is a valid point. First of all, I was thinking about audible formats, but certainly you are correct that the EPI doesn't address low literacy in terms of low health literacy.
Further comments, questions, please?
Well, again, I think with the word enable, you already say that it's something for the future, one of the advantages for the future. So it doesn't have to be the case that once EPI is implemented, we have more accessible patient leaflets that are easier to understand. It's just that it makes it easier to make it. So I think with the word enable, that is clear.
Good, clear. Any more? Yes, please, Marian.
I just wondered how this will tie in with the Falsified Medicines Directive.
Clarify your question, please.
There are a number of fake medicines out in the EU, out in the world, that pretend to be valid medicines. And I wondered, is there a barrier to stop these getting onto an EPI system?
I mean, it refers back to what we mentioned earlier. Technically, it would be possible to have an interaction between EPI and the barcode, for example, used by Falsified Medicines Directive, but further exploration of that would be part of the implementation project.
Thank you very much.
And yes, well, I'm not expert here, but based on, again, from the internationalization point of view, yes, the part of the falsification has been studied as part of IDMP. And actually, one of the enhancements through the SPOR master data management is also to cover this use case. And it's very clear way how we can do it. It is part of the ISO 11615 standard, as has been implemented by ISO 20443.
We'll find the reference. It's useful. Anything more? Otherwise, I would suggest we move on. No? Yeah? Let's move on to the next one, please.
Thank you. So the next one is, and again, this came up before, is complementing paper package leaflet. And I think we want to make clear as a key principles that electronic product information will not supersede or negate the requirement of pharmaceutical legislation to provide the package leaflet with all medications, with all medicines. So it's intended to expand the formats in which it's available. And I think, again, we have seen a lot of situations by which the electronic standard will be able to, supply or address the deficiencies that the paper offer today, but will not involve any change to the content of EPI. That's something which is also important. So.
Yeah, so I think this key principle puts the whole initiative actually in its current legal regulatory framework and actually presents it as a complementary to the current existing and mandatory tools in a way. So are there any specific questions or comments on this point?
I have a question. If there is an app or a device or whatever is set up with the various languages, do you mean that the national authorities can use it as their own system, or should everybody use one system and select languages? How should a practical issue? What do you think?
Well, here we are not talking about languages. I mean, what we mention is that we will provide the product information in electronic format, but it doesn't exclude that there is a requirement to include the package leaflet with the medication. Usually this is done as a paper.
I know, I'm asking because we have also immigrants that don't speak German, for example. So if there would be a way to select languages, might it also be an option to include other languages? That's why I'm asking.
Certainly, this would be something where the language, where the translation is available, we would like to have that accessible. In addition, with the controlled vocabularies such as SPOR, this supports multilingual content. But we're not currently proposing any new additional translations, so it would be just where the translated version is available. For example, like centrally authorized medicines.
Yeah, because at the moment you don't have that option, so that would be really an add-on.
Not all the medicines have translation in all the languages, but the centrally authorized medicines do have the translations, and so for currently we would envisage if the translation is available, then it would be possible to access it.
Okay. I think for EU languages, I think everybody's clear. I understood your point to be, could be Arabic or other languages, or so I see a problem with the definition that it has to be authorized, so who becomes then responsible, but I'm happy to see Alexios, you have a...
No, I think as Aida correctly mentioned, we are currently talking about EU languages, official languages, not for non-EU languages. We have some examples. I'm not sure how relevant it is. For example, in the Baltic states, there is also the question of Russian, because a big part of the population speaks a non-EU language. And in certain cases, we have allowed, subject, of course, to the agreement of the national competent authority, Latvia, Lithuania, or Estonia, that certain information also translated in Russian, and it's reflected in the labeling. It's nothing that we are against currently. Of course, it's something that needs to be checked with the national authority, reflected appropriately, that, for example, the Russian translation is an exact, faithful translation of whatever we have authorized in the English and Latvian translation, for example. But it is a possibility. It's just we are just talking now about EU official languages, and we are working within this legal framework.
Possibly part of the Faith in the Cathedral, isn't it? But
it's a wing on the cathedral.
A wing on the cathedral. We are building
one.
one.
Not cathedral. As Germany was mentioned, so in Germany it's allowed to have other languages in the package leaflet, but it's not approved by the agency. So if we are going to the statute definition, what we had at the beginning, this would be not by agency approved information.
I think it's a valid point. I think it's more one again that we would park for a further development, isn't it? So if that's okay. Medicines for Europe, please.
Hi, Angela again. Just one question. EPI, if we assume that EPI would be the most current, accurate source of information, if I'm a patient and I see the leaflet and it's already 1 year or 6 months out of date, Has this principle taken into consideration what messages we'd be sending out to the patients? So if the patient information leaflet paper is out of date, I should be going or referencing to the EPI?
Yeah, this has been considered in a way, again, is work in progress, but I think the solution which is proposed is that there will be a need to have a disclaimer which says that wherever the electronic format is available, this is supposed to be the latest information.
Again, it's no more different than what is currently done. It could be that whatever you have in your current pack in the market is not the up-to-date. It's probably out of date with the current approved and published electronic PDF of the product because there was a variation. It was updated very quickly. The paper version hasn't followed in exactly the same pace. So it's not very different from what is currently is the case.
Yeah, I don't think the worry is about the difference. I think it's that patients won't understand why the leaflet might say 12 months date of approval, whereas if they looked online, it would be different. So just guidance more so for the patient as opposed to what we want to be implementing here.
Seems to make sense, and we take note of that point. Are there further questions or comments, suggestions? No, it doesn't look like one, please.
So we go to the next one, and again, we have discussed that. The idea is that we will give open access to regulatory approved information only. And again, the definition is clearly, we are only talking about delivery of regulatory approved medicines. So the content is exactly the same as the current product information. EPI should always be published as open data, and it will be freely accessible for use and reuse. And has been mentioned, of course, we will not have control of it. We only have control of the source. And the source is reliable in the sense that it's approved information. So EPI will not be used for delivery of promotional information in the sense that we can guarantee that the same safeguards that today apply for product information, statutory product information, in other formats should apply as well to electronic format. There has been a lot of concerns voiced by several groups that electronic format should be vehicled for promotional information, but we are quite reassured about the discussion and about the express comments from all stakeholders that this shouldn't be the case and that we have similar guarantees.
Is there any supportive, please?
Scott Wishaw from the Royal Dutch Pharmacists Association. When you speak of promotional information, does that also include off-label information? Should the EPI be used as a source for something that entails off-label information?
Alexia?
I think it's clear, as is currently the case, it should be used along the terms of the authorization. So whatever is the indication that the regulators have authorized and approved, this is how it should be used. So to answer your question, no, it should not.
Please.
Stefan Ammann from the European Association of Hospital Pharmacists. I completely agree that it's very crucial to keep any promotional information out of the EPI. I think we all agree, or hope we all agree in this. But the statement is a little bit misunderstanding. As we just discussed, we want the EPI to be on the accurate, on the newest level, so it cannot be the same as the current PI in the package. So I think we should just, by writing it, make sure and clear that it focuses on the promotional information and that the EPI can be more current information than in the printed one. So this is, and the other way, it's a little logic contradiction, I think.
It's a clarification that we are not referring to what is in the pack, but actually what is currently approved. I think that's a valid, we can clarify that. Thank you very much. Any more comments, suggestions? No? Juan, then we move on.
Number 7, key principle number 7 refers to the multilingual context, even if we commented before. And I think the idea here is that EU citizens should be able to read electronic product information in their own language. So we should be able to provide medicines product information in all 24 official languages and Icelandic and Norwegian. Just to clarify that not all medicines which are approved in Europe are multilingual. As we have said before, only central authorized products have all languages available, and this is not expected to change. We can make that clear in the key principles. Of course, national authorized products will be, information for national authorized products will be available in the country where this product is authorized nationally. So we can make that clear. However, we should be able to have an interface which can switch from one language to another.
Yes, and also I think it's not only available, it's actually you can, independently on where you bought the pack, basically. If you were traveling, you could just access the information, or even if you're a foreigner in a given country, basically. So yeah, it expands the use.
Yeah, I understand it's important to mention the multilingual aspect of EPI, but somehow I see a clear overlap of this number 7 with the previous one. We just said that the content of the EPI is the same as the current EPI, and the current EPI is multilingual. So if we just say that, this one is also somehow covered. So if you still want to mention clearly about multilinguality of EPI, then I would propose to put them under each other, just subheading of the previous one, rather than a separate one. But they are just like very much overlapping.
Maybe we can further clarify that Principle 7 is more about the functionality of providing, allowing or making easier having multilingual, rather than number 6, which is compliance. Yeah, we can make it clearer, I think, in number 7.
Well, in that case, you can put it on the subheading of possible implications of EPI. Anyhow, there are overlaps with others, so I think it can be combined.
When we start to get familiar with your line of thought as well, so please.
I would like to refer to paragraph 1. EU citizens should be able to read in their own languages. I think that we are overlooking a large segment of population. I'm talking about refugees or immigrants who do not understand. Are they prevented from using the medication? There should be something for them as well, because we are talking about millions of people, and out of these millions, many of them are patients. It's very limitative, I think, this one. Something should be there to include, to address the needs of these people who are not, very literate, let's say, in the language of the countries they are working, living, and so on and so forth.
I think it ties back also a little bit to the previous comment. I think it's again an expansion and an opening of possibilities of this tool. I understood we are working in the current legal framework, which does not foresee necessarily. Cesar?
Yes, I know that several member states are considering to offer this information in the main language of the people that live in the member states. But again, this is part of the things that can be done once you have agreed in a common standard and you develop so on. So for sure, there is a need. I don't think that is a key principle right now, but it's a possibility that is being considered already by several member states. So to offer this in the main languages that are speaking of the people that live in the country, not necessarily but again, it's a step that is forward of this beginning of the project.
Thank you.
As Cesar mentioned, the legal framework is clear. We are working with 24 languages, but because of this standard and the electronic format, it will give the opportunity to individual member states, because what you are referring, unfortunately, is national responsibility to translate and make it available in languages other than the EU ones. So hopefully this standard, whenever it's implemented, and the structured product information will open up and make it more easy for national authorities or other initiatives to translate and make it available to people that do not have currently access, speaking about refugees.
Thank you. Mathilde Behrens from the Danish Medicines Agency. My apologies if this has been already explained, but maybe you can clarify. Are we committing here to all 24 languages, all medicines, whether they be marketed or not in a given country?
For central authorized products, yes, because for central authorized products, information is already available in all languages independently whether they are marketed or not in a country. For medicines which are national authorized, it's different because it will be only where it's authorized nationally. So,
thank you.
Just one second.
We can make that clearer in the key principle because it's true that needs to be precise.
Thank you. This already happens in lots of countries. In the UK, for instance, there are lots of areas where the predominant population is Southeast Asian, and all health information is provided in Urdu or Hindi or Tamil or Bengali, so that patients that you're treating can understand it.
I understand all these argumentations, but please don't forget we act in a legal framework. We are not changing the legal framework. If we are speaking about languages, it means we are doing in electronic form how we are now doing it on paper. So, for example, we have in Germany a Danish minority, but it's not on the agenda because for Germany, Danish is not an official language that we publish it in Danish. But this will open the possibility simply to look, if this is product or similar product is available in Denmark, I can read it in Danish. But we cannot solve the problems of the world, sorry.
Nicely put. And I also start small, deliver small, and then basically see all the other options as we go along. Please, the gentleman.
David Harry, European AIDS Treatment Group. I'm sorry to insist, but I think we are missing an occasion here. I would like to see something on top that people with readability challenges, these challenges will be addressed with other tools than written information, because we have the possibility here. So I want to see something popping up. We have elderly people, we have children, we have all sorts of people who are unable to read. And we will have tools now to talk to these people and inform them about their medicines. I want to see a reference here.
I hope it was clear. I mean, we tried to capture in the previous key principle where we said that once implemented, electronic formats offers a lot of possibilities for these people who have these specific needs. And maybe we can make it more clear, but definitely this is one of the benefits we expect to provide. It can be for people with readability, people with special needs. I think, again, we can give so many examples that we wouldn't finish, but definitely that's the idea, and we will try to make that clear in the document.
But is it about the format as well, audible or no? I don't know. Or maybe other things we haven't invented yet. First, sorry, I think there was another person before. Yes.
Hello, I'm Lee Rotsinen from Estonian agency, and I just wanted to add that we are really translating the official product information to the Russian language in case of OTC. And I think that the only thing we can use this standardized version is that now we are translating all the text all the times. But if it's standardized, we can just use a part of where something is changed, and we can just focus on it. And for that, the standardization is okay. But all these translations, it's totally national decision to translate text or not.
Yes, please.
Well, there was a reason that this morning I said, don't go down this road. These are all downstream scenarios. And there are limitless. The sky is the limit. So if you want to go down this road, then you should make 1,000 pages of all the things that could be possible in future. And then there is still someone can say, oh, you miss something. So please don't go down this road. And if you want to go, just put the things together and mention very clearly, these are just examples of possible scenarios, and they are not exclusive. But please, I think if you mention it that way, then you are somehow covered with all those comments that you are probably missing something. These are all downstream scenarios and not upstream.
With the sky and the wings, I mean, we're getting there. Yeah. Any further comments? No? Then I would suggest, Juan, we move on.
So the next one is about interoperability with EU and global initiatives. And again, we have discussed it, and we all agree that EPI will interface and needs to interact with many ongoing and unforeseen e-health initiatives, such as we have mentioned today, e-prescription, e-health, electronic records, etc. Also, it's important that interoperability with existing and future initiatives is considered when it is designed from the beginning. And here we are talking about cross-border prescription, electronic health records, the future European Medicines Web Portal, pharmacovigilance systems, export data management services, a future European Common Data Model, and national electronic product information systems, which already exist today. So this is clear that we need to ensure whenever this is built and whenever the electronic standard is selected, is fully interoperable and has the potential to be interoperable with these services. Because these are the ones who add all these functionalities that we have been describing, which is the downstream. But it's important that this is built from the beginning.
This clearly gives also an incentive to do it now, because the longer you wait, the more, as we saw already, a number of very nice examples earlier in the presentation. So there is a need to quickly agree on this principle. Is there fundamental comments on this? Please, yes.
This system is both for the patients as well as for the healthcare professionals. Speaking of interoperability, will it be possible to link with the clinical trial, which is vital for both for the doctors as well as for the patients? Thank you.
Yeah, it's within the vision of the European Medicines Web Portal, which is something which is further down the line. So that's foreseen.
Well, when the future is there and it's coming, it's better actually to mention a reference to that. One of the things that has been implemented actually as part of IDAP is the GSRS system. So if you go there, you can connect directly substance together with the clinical trials based on the clinicaltrial.gov information. Even we have taken actually information about EMA as doing in everyday experiments we do. So you can see even how it is done on the low level. But in the future, will be part of this initiative, let's say. Yeah.
Thank you. Please, Gesine.
So, Gesine, again. Well, sorry. I mean, just one point here. While we are, of course, we are striving to have an interoperable system with all existing national systems, but it may be that we get to the point that we understand that our common EU standard would work best in a certain way, and then it might be that not all national systems will be then interoperable. So again, it's the point that we shouldn't hinder ourselves by stopping at a certain point to get everything ready. Perhaps sometimes we will see that national systems have to change if we want to have a system that works on EU level and also globally, because I really liked what the Commissioner said here, that we should strive for a very wide view and also for a global view at the end of the day. So I'm not sure how to phrase this, but when I read, well, it should address all these things. Yes, we want this ideally, but we should also see that we get the best available system, and then perhaps we might adapt others to this.
It ties in already with the next point as well about implementation and flexibility in terms of implementation. Do you suggest that the wording must be considered as not sufficient then? Because that's probably implicit, or it leaves it open. But any comments?
It leaves it open, I think. Please?
I think following up on Josina, I fully agree, and it has to be a two directions. It's not that we have to adapt to the systems or the systems has to adapt to us. I think we need to, whenever we choose the standard, we have to consider that. And I think as much as possible, we have to align with everything. In the end, if it doesn't talk to each other, if all the systems don't talk to each other, we fail. So somehow there might be limitations in the as we implement that, but that's the ultimate goal.
I mean, we don't see interoperability as restricting what we do with EPI. It should not and will not.
But I think the way it's worded leaves it open, because all it's saying is you should consider it, so you should strive for it. It's not saying that you must do it. So it's just taking it into account. I think it leaves it I think it's worded very nicely.
Fully agree. Maybe it's what Livy says. We should make clear it's not a restriction. It's not a prerequisite. It's just that we must consider it whenever we do it, and we make as best as we can.
Okay, there was a further comment. Oh, yeah.
Thank you. I don't see any problem with the wording on the slide, but in the draft principles under the implications, it sort of promises that EPI will be interoperable with national infrastructures as a whole. So you might want to consider rewording that. That sounds quite ambitious in that wording, making the EPI interoperable with national infrastructures as such. We might have a difficulty with that.
So we'll align terminologies.
Yes, just to give you a little more information, that is correct. The colleagues actually tried in this slide at a high level to tell us actually how we do it. You know, it's a bunch of some thousand of pages about this. But just to give you an example, yes, indeed, there are initiatives as part of the Commission, part of the digital health and the policy about Horizon 2020 projects. For example, there was a specific vertical actions 2 years ago with open medicine as part of Horizon 2020. And it was based on the decision of eHealth Network, where all member states were discussing about the common model about e-prescription across border. And the information was based not on even in IDMP, even in Article 57 data, actually, which is in production. So what you see there about the European Medicine Web Portal and pharmacovigilance are key, actually, players in of the information provision. And now SPOR and the other service coming again. The cross-border is a very important thing, for, not only for actually regulators, but actually for healthcare itself. People who are traveling, who change borders. But it's not only EU, you can be in Brazil and suddenly you go to a pharmacy and say, that's my drug and I don't have it, what am I going to do it? So you are going to consume this kind of information, and actually based on new tools like the prescription, based on PHPI identifiers, for example, you can correctly do the e-dispensing based on the information which is already there. So yes, the answer is we already prepared the environment and the international ecosystem for the infrastructure. I can guarantee, I can commit by saying that it's already there waiting for the use cases. HL7 have at least 10 or 10, 15 projects running now around medications that will try actually to prepare messages for information exchange. They do profiles. Even now, EMA is going to announce the fire spore about that and how we're going to do it. There are numerous projects as part of Horizon and Digital Health, which provide tools and prototypes, and they have provided also application of how we can do that In the terminology also part, you can find ontology, so you can find a number of artifacts around it, how the environment is ready to accommodate this case. So EPI is part of it. This is how
Thank you,
we can do
Pendot.
it.
I think if we come on to the next one, it might address your concern as well, because it's about flexibility in the system.
Yes, are there more questions? Or no, we move on. Okay, good. Flexibility.
So flexibility implementation is what we believe can be maybe necessary and is one of the key elements to successfully progress on electronic product information. And I think the idea is that what is the essential prerequisite, and we come again to the same point, is that all stakeholders, companies, and regulators commit to implement the common electronic standards of all 2 medicines. After that, we propose to have flexibility in terms of timelines and also processes. And by processes, we offer the possibility for some authorities to implement electronic information from the point of submission or to transform the outcome of the evaluation, the Word document or the PDF, into electronic format. This flexibility is what we think will allow everyone to move on as soon as possible if they are ready, or for other countries, depending on their priorities, their resources, their capabilities, to do it at a later stage, but still guarantee an harmonized approach and to still guarantee this interoperability that we have discussed before. However, we all agree that the ultimate goal should be to have a full harmonized implementation. That's why we would propose to have a roadmap, which is at the level of HMA and EMA, which is guiding implementation and to give even some timelines framework.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting key principle, because somehow we have just been talking about all the benefits of the EPI format. We have found lots of proposals even to expand the potential of the EPI, as well as linkages to other systems. And now if we are faced with the reality of possibly a multi-speed implementation, I think what is being referred, or even at which stage in the procedure evaluation you would actually engage with it. So I don't know, is there any specific suggestions, comments, support?
Yeah, this is Georg from the German ePilot. So I fully understand the rationale behind it, and I really welcome it. The one thing that comes to my mind when reading that is actually for those member states who may wish to connect the ePIL format to their authorization process of the national translations. This again may be a potential hurdle to implement the ePIL concept in that country, because as long as you really have not established broadly the system with pharmaceutical companies, there may be a hurdle to that, and it may slow down the process. Whereas where you don't have it connected to the approval process in itself, you just have the output, be it on the paper, and you just invert it, and then you can really easily spread it to the existing systems. And I think that should be something that should be considered, whether, even though I understand it, or whether this would be not potentially a separate, very important topic to take on, to say, and also linking that perhaps to the process we are using in the centralized process. Is there a possibility when we do label change variations to do that really based on an electronic format? But I would tend to disconnect that really from the idea to distribute the electronic format, because it has additional challenges, and I think we need to be careful that we don't create an additional hurdle there.
I think we fully take the point, and I understand that it's a challenge and it's maybe a burden very much put on pharmaceutical industry. And I think we have to look at both sides, because on one hand, we fully see this point, and I think that the solution to this should be to try to minimize as much as possible this transitional period we are talking about. But on the other hand, I hope you agree, and it has been clearly said this today. If we try to implement all that when all member states are ready and then push the button, it's a cathedral. and it's what we have been discussing before. I don't think so we will be able. We need to have a quick solution, which is allow the common standard to be chosen so that those who are ready don't need to wait for it and can already start working on it in a way which we have a guarantee is the way everyone agrees to follow at some point. We will have to discuss maybe with you separate, this will be part of the implementation, how we can minimize all these problems, how we can find solutions for every different aspect. But we fully believe that without this transitional period is in practical terms at this moment, looking at the European Union, I don't think so we can have a quick implementation.
Teresa, you wanted to intervene? And I think also yes.
Just to say that, I mean, again, this is downstream, but there are a lot of benefits of managing this kind of information for everyone. For the marketing authorization holders, we can speed up a lot of process, so the medicines can reach the patients faster than usually. We can avoid a lot of resource wasting in doing repetitive process, but instead of that, having very aligned process. So consider that for sure there may be some harder, but again, that there are so many benefits behind that we need to consider that. And I fully agree with the commitment that we have to do. We have 85% of products with EPI, but if we need to move to another standard, we will do it. So, but again, we really appreciate the flexible environment to do it. I think it's crucial.
For reinforcing this point, I think there was the lady here and then Peter.
Elena Ruiz de la Torre from European Migraine and Headache Alliance. As this is a service for the patients, as I see it, and this is a very practical question. Will EMA allow the umbrella patient organization to share the link of EPI at their websites and their members?
It's open access, and that's what we propose. One is publicly available. I mean, the desire is that it is promote, its use is disseminated as much as possible, and we count on European organizations to help and national organizations to help on this.
Part of the ambition totally, Victoria?
This principle sounds very much like one of the European recommendations. To tell you the truth, I prefer regulations or directives, which are a lot more compelling for the governments. I am a patient, and this is what I want. Flexibility is good for as long as it's within the limits of decent time frame. I think that the time frame should be somehow mentioned. However, not later than give it 10 years, but give it. If you leave it just like that, it may never take place. Thank you very much.
Yeah, the roadmap has been mentioned, but when will that be discussed?
Well, this will be part of implementation. It will be taken during consultation or after consultation, but we need to involve HMA, and hopefully the roadmap incorporates timelines and try to guide the implementation as much as possible.
First, Peter, and then we get back to you.
Thank you. I think I'm slightly different positions at my German colleague from industry. One of the success of Europe is we are not every time inventing a wheel. And in this case, how to transform paper into electronic, we have just done with the e-application form, the application form to e-application form. So that's the reason why I'm wondering. There we had a perfect roadmap. We have published the timelines, when it's the end for each procedure, with which procedure we start. So we have the blueprint. There's not anything new to develop or to invent. We simply apply the principles that are successful to the next project. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll dig it out as a blueprint, please.
Yeah, not a really a fundamental comment, but just to satisfy comment from Viorica. Maybe instead of flexible, we can say stepwise. It sounds a bit more active. And then something about roadmap. I see it more as a roadmap of the transitional period rather than a roadmap of implementation. So I wonder if you see a difference in that, but I think this is a roadmap to help those stakeholders who will join later, how they will join, rather than a roadmap how to implement something which is not built yet. But it's just a suggestion.
Well, I think stepwise flexible. I think we could reflect because it has a slightly different connotation. Don't know, Olga. Did you want to?
I don't want to give a bit, the wrong message or that, I bring back the discussion. It's just that, when we are talking about, transition periods and, kind of, flexibility, it is because, we must not give the impression that we'll create a new mandatory requirement. I think we have to be a bit, aware of this, for operators, for business operators, for member states, just, while I fully agree, about, that we have previously experienced that, we have to build it up in a stepwise approach, just, as a word of caution, not to give the impression that we create mandatory requirements.
Oh, thank you, Olga. I don't know if we are very specific in terms of implementation, so it depends a bit of what is the end product, isn't it? So it can be a transition till the end product. I'm not completely sure if we have anything. No. There is further comments, please. Yes.
Yeah, with regard, Rüdiger from IATF, with regard to the roadmap, I think it's very important to have such a roadmap and clarity on what is to be achieved in a certain time frame. Otherwise, we may see a diversification all over Europe, and we will not deliver what is in our intention, in our mind, and the real objective. So this will be key. I think about how we do it, we can talk about in the data governance process, because also here we need to change our mind. We have existing product information, yes, and this will be a huge workload for all of us to convert it into EPI, but then we need to find new clever ways of managing updates to what we converted and made it available.
Do we have anything on the conversion of older products at national? No, that will be.
I think this is not specifically addressed, but we will have to cover. Maybe it's under the roadmap. But I think eventually we will need to define the ultimate goal is to have all products in electronic format. So it means that there is a backlog that somehow we'll have to deal with. And in practical terms, we haven't discussed how this is going to be. So we will need to address that, definitely.
From past experience with similar situations, we can deal with it in the post-authorization phase. So whatever product is coming through a post-authorization procedure will have to comply with a new standard. We don't have to put a specific framework by that date. Everything has to be done. I think this is what we applied for many legislative changes that affected product information, and maybe the same principle could apply in this context.
Valid point, because then you have a much faster uptake of EPI. Medicines for oh no,
yeah. To follow up on exactly this point, fully right. But we should then think of all the products that are connected, and if not every member state would be ready, we may implement it in some, with the post-authorization phase, and already here we create diversity, and we need to have something good and a very good time frame, a good roadmap in mind, that we go to this common objective.
Let's agree on the standard first. I think the rest will be much easier.
Exactly. Sorry.
Just to address, because this also came during the discussion, it's true that there will be diversity. At some point, there will be different formats coexisting. And this is not good, because we are not giving everybody the same accessibility and the same information. But we have to bear in mind that this diversity already exists today. We already have countries or other countries where these formats are available and others where not. So we want to speed up all this process by which, as soon as possible, everyone has access to electronic product information. So in a way, we are not...
Medicine for Europe?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm in total agreement with what everybody said, so I won't rehash that conversation. There's just a part in the implication that worries me. So this morning, I think from what I heard, people wanted to have the EPI available within the regulatory process. So at approval, there's an EPI ready for dissemination. But when I look at the implications, the scope seems to be a lot wider, that there is a flexible opportunity for member states to either have the EPI within the process or even after the evaluation process. And that's a small concern, because if we look at the generic industry, who might be submitting 500 changes a month, then that can be a lot of work that's going to be coming in on limited resource within member states as well as within the industry. So is there a possibility just to try and articulate what really we mean by flexibility when we have EPI, either within the regulatory process or as part of evaluation? Because that scope seems so broad that we might be inundated and then it's a showstopper.
I think it comes back to the stepwise in the end. No?
Just to be clear, what we mean by flexibility is both in terms of timing, when a regulatory authority is ready to implement it, and once it is decided to implement it, in terms of scope, as you say, whether two choices: to go for electronic product information from the very beginning of the assessment process, so that the submission of the application will be done electronically, and then it will continue to be electronic throughout the whole assessment, or whether the evaluation will continue to be done as currently is done, with Word documents and PDF, and at the end of the authorization, the company will be the one transforming this product information into electronic format, and then this will be published on the website. So this will coexist for a short time until, in the end, we manage to have all authorities having electronic product information, ideally from the point of submission.
Okay, there might be a need for a bit of clarity then, because there's still a leeway to change or to move within the regulatory process. But do you mean that the conversion is done before the approved product information, or are you expecting or anticipating that the product information is approved by the regulators and then there is a next step or a third step that's following?
If I may use the example of the centralized procedure as we anticipated, is that we would work, let's say, with the Word version throughout the approval process. It will be the CHMP gives a positive opinion. We have the translations reviewed. We reach the point that we have to send to the Commission the final documents. At that point, the final versions, as is currently done, are converted, submitted in the electronic format, HTML, for example, XML, whatever, with a declaration. It is normally done now. You work in Word and you submit a declaration, say that the PDF versions, the final ones, are compliant with finally approved Word, English, and translation.
And sorry, I'm
It's a very simplified approach, but
it's simplified, and I really want to stop bashing on this drum, so I will stop after this. But we're still looking at today's world, because in tomorrow's world, there are other initiatives in place where we're looking at harmonizing the regulatory review process via the target operating model. And I'm just wondering, are we confusing the two? Because on one side, we really want to be digital and we want to move towards the future, but we're still taking on principles that are focusing on experience that's already been done and may not be around in the next couple of years. I'm not talking short term, more mid-term, long-term view.
I think it has been reiterated several times. Juan has explained it. Our view as well and our wish is to move from the submission, a PIM sort of thing, but we have to, we should learn from the mistakes of the past, and we have to take a very cautious approach, at least from the centralized point of view, because it's a very complex environment. It's slightly different from the national procedure. There are many stakeholders involved. This is some of the reasons why PIM didn't work very well, amongst others. So in that sense, we have to be extremely careful, let alone the situation of our agency currently. But it's not that we are excluding it. Of course, we will move there, and this is the ultimate goal. But we need time, at least us, to go there.
Well, I understand completely why those where those worries are coming from. And sorry to disagree, Alexis. I mean, I agree with you the way you want to handle it, but that will be only for transitional period. So that would be acceptable the way you explained it for the transitional period for those of us that will not start, but the pioneers who want to start, they are going to build up, at least that's the idea, to not to waste the resources. So we are not going to make a plan for those conversions which will be forever in that way. Those conversions would only be acceptable during the transitional period, and that's why I also thought if you're talking about a roadmap, it's better to talk about a roadmap of the transitional period, because then it's clear that sometime this transitional period will be ended. But I think we will come to that in the next key principle, so maybe we should not discuss it further now.
Correct, but I think there was 2 interventions still, or you would like, no? Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, I agree with Fakerin, and also just to say that it's totally understandable for EMA to make the decision for now, but it already says we have to commit to implement the Common Electronic Standard, and that means, I think, that we move from a paper-based, word-based world into digital first. So I think that is a commitment that we do with the first line.
It's just coming on to the timing. So, I mean, it comes back to the stepwise approach and I suppose a roadmap to full implementation and bearing in mind, as we saw from this morning, that some member states are rather advanced pioneers and others are not there yet. So it just allows this harmonized approach without us all waiting to go together. So it's just a way of getting started. But I think the next slide will help us. And also bear in mind that this is going out for consultation. So we don't, I mean, you can have more reflection. I mean, it's very good to have the dialogue while we're here, but please don't think that we're trying to lock you down and you won't have an opportunity to come back and make your case further.
I think we propose to move on to number 10. I think that was first Kim, then, if I'm opening it up. Sorry, just 1 second. Kim?
Kim Sherwood, the Swedish MPA. As a comment to what Anjana said, when we had PIM about 8 years ago, I think the IT maturity and the attitude maturity was totally different from today. I think things happen faster and faster today, and we could compare with the QR code concept. When it was introduced, some countries said, no, we are not mature at all, we cannot have the QR code. A couple of months later, everyone was accepting the QR code concept. Those countries said, no, we cannot include a video in the QR code. Those countries can now include a video. So things happen faster and faster. So I think transferring approved text into that tool we're talking about, then will start the snowball effect. Transferring text will lead to working from the submission within the tool. So I'm not very worried. I think we have to state things here, but everything will be solved faster than you can think of.
Encouraging statement, thank you, Jazina. And then I think we move on to the last principle.
Yeah, so thank you for this encouragement, because I was really thinking during our discussion, if we think this is a priority and it's something that is benefit for all citizens, then we should really make this clear. And if we could agree that there's a clear wording that reflects this priority, I think this would help with the with the understanding of this point.
Okay, I think we got a number of suggestions to possibly reinforce or at least modify the wordings proposed. I think we take them back. Let's move on to number 10, last principle.
Yes. So I think this is the the proposed governance process. And I think the idea is that we have foreseen the two possibilities, is the NCA have the scientific evaluation, and there is the possibility of having in the bottom EPI from the very beginning of the evaluation, so that we will have, once the evaluation is concluded, the outcome is EPI in the electronic format of the product information, or during this that we have been calling transitional period, the evaluation will continue as currently is done with Word, PDF, and then the outcome, which is a Word document, is transformed, is converted into electronic product information by the company. Once the electronic product information is available, it will be stored in the National Compensation Authority or EMA, which is what we call trust source of regulatory approved information, and this will be the basis for to be used first, displayed in the website of the national authority, EMA or national authority, or to be captured and used by any third party, which means third-party applications, e-prescriptions, electronic health records, etc. So different ways by which the information will reach the patients and the healthcare professionals.
Sorry, it's me again. And let me be the first, because before anybody wants to start discussing about it, let me say that what I just said in the previous comment. The conversion part, we should somehow make it clear that the conversion part is for the transitional period. And that's not one of the key principles, to have the conversion. That's one thing. Second thing is that when we are talking about EPI being submitted by the company, being evaluated as an EPI, and then being put into database, we are not talking about a database. We are talking about a portal. So the whole, if I try to be a bit visual, I would prefer that trusted source to be expanded to the whole reviewing process. So we should have a portal. The company will submit the EPI within the same portal. The authorities will assess the EPI within the portal. That will be a private part of the portal, which is accessible only for the companies and the regulators. And then when it's finalized, it's already in the portal, but it will move from the secure part to the public part. So it's not about a data store that we create, it's about a portal that we create. And part of it, it's confidential, only accessible by the company and regulators. And the end part of it, which is approved EPI, will be public and will be accessible for the other stakeholders. That will be the goal. And then we have the conversion part, which is there only for the transitional period.
I mean, I guess it's how you define a portal. How, which, I'm not sure what that word really means. How we see it is that the evaluation occurs, the data is stored, and in fact, what we mean is in databases at the national and EMA level, and then via an API, the same API is used for the public websites at EMA and NCA level, and these would be the trusted source for the public. But ultimately, that information comes out of our databases.
The difference somehow, okay, I hope you hear me. Difference is that here we get a discussion, who is the owner of this data store? But if you are talking about a system that the company will log in it, submit EPI in this system, assessment will happen within this. It's just the same way that we do the things. But now on this scheme, it sounds like that we are creating a data store that it didn't exist before. which is not the case. We are just going to store and assess the things in different formats. We are not creating a new trusted source. We are just using, we are just reformatting the things that we do. So somehow it's confusing. But I mean, maybe we should discuss it another time.
Sure, I
Yeah,
take
we
your
can
point and we
take
can
it
certainly
offline.
consider.
Peter, you want to add?
I would take this illustration for information only, that it could be one of the scenes. Because what happens in parallel, as several times mentioned, the spore is one picture. There are also some member states, and Lee and myself are part of the group, which are working on something which is called Target Operating Model PMS. And I have tried to avoid this, but there's other things ongoing. And this would exactly fit into this Target Operating Model PMS, which we are discussing. But it depends when we are ending up with a definition of PMS, on spore, or whatever. So it's already done. We only have to combine what is already available. The only problem is we don't know exactly at which point of time we have the different projects ready to be connected. But this has not to be seen in isolation. So we are not preparing new databases or whatever.
Cesar, you want to compliment?
Oh, my comment, I mean, I think that this can reflect what can happen. We can discuss if there is a transition period, how long, and so on. My comment comes to the public websites. I mean, it is stated in the text that EPI will be made available to users, patients, and healthcare professionals through websites at the EMA level and member state level. And I would delete the brackets, because I think that that member states, I mean, I would delete the brackets, and I would add if available, because, I mean, not to oblige to any member state to have their own web portal if they don't want to maintain it, but also to be able to the national web portal to publish the information of the centralized authorized product.
I mean, definitely, I mean, we try to illustrate this, but it's clear that it's not clear for everyone. What we want to make clear is that we are not trying to build anything. No portal, no database, nothing new. Is of course, nothing is changing to the current situation. The outcome of the evaluation, which is the product information, whether it's in electronic format, whether it's in PDF or in Word, is sent to the authorities, and the authorities publish on their website. And this is not going to change, whether it's electronic or not. So maybe the best way is to try to describe this, but not to make an illustration if we are unable to give one which is clear for everyone, so that we can take it. Also, I want to mention, because I think it's true that we are discussing, and maybe we are using this transitional period, where transitional period applies for legislation, and that definitely there is no legal basis behind this initiative. So maybe we will try to word in a way that we don't give the impression that there is a transitional period, because actually in actual terms there is not. So we will make that clear in the document, and we will explain it. So definitely we need to define the two scenarios, which is the situation where not everybody has yet implemented it, and there is the possibility to use this conversion tool, or the possibility of having it from submission. We will describe that in the text, and we'll try to avoid maybe, we will explore whether we can come with an illustration, but if it's not clear, we don't want to release this for consultation, because it may give the wrong impression.
I saw a few hands here, and then later.
Hello, it's Lee from Estonia, and I actually agree with Peter, and I think that according to his illustration, it's somehow taken off from the regulatory process and the medicinal product data, but actually the product information is tightly connected to the product information, and it should be held together, and we change the product information during the regulatory process. So it's, if we will have a standard and a definition of any product, I think we should think about all ongoing projects, and we should add it to this project.
Agreed. Maybe Anjana?
Hi. Okay, last one, I promise, then I'm leaving because I have a flight to catch. So I think the regulatory landscape is complex as it is, and if we put this picture up, it's just going to dissolve the messages that we're trying to get across. If we really want to get the message across, then it would be okay to start with EPI and then the dissemination of where that information is being used, with the provision or maybe a caveat that the regulatory processes are being looked at within another program.
Yeah, no, yeah. I think we actually already agreed that we would adapt. I don't know, Panjan.
Yeah, and just to sum up, actually the ultimate target is to submit the information one and use by all system. Actually, this is how we can summarize the discussion. Yeah, this is the target.
Victoria?
I'm sorry to say that, but we come across again to the issue of availability, which is extremely important. We are talking about patients. I do not know what exactly needs to be done, but you cannot say here website at EMA level for all EU medicine. Not all EU medicine is readily available in all member states. So what exactly are we going to do? I think that something is wrong here, and something it's either been it's either needed to be rephrased or address the issue of non-availability in all member states. Because this, I can tell you, it will create a huge problem, particularly in those countries where patients know that they suffer from something, and the medication is not available in their country. Thank you very much.
Point taken. I think that's, I don't know if, I don't think there's more hands, is there? No? Then
No, I think, and just to reassure you that we are working very actively on availability. So please rest assured that we are. I mean, perhaps not the focus of this workshop today, but we definitely are. Yeah. So I think we are now moving to a close. I think it's been a tremendous workshop. We can all agree it's been very fruitful. Everybody looks exhausted. I mean, it's been very interactive. I mean, we set the objective that it would be interactive, and I haven't been in such an interactive workshop for a very long time. You'll probably be very pleased to see I'm not going to attempt to summarize everything that's been said and capture all the points raised, because there will be a report from the workshop. But I'd just like to wrap up with a few highlights, and bear with me, I will do my best. I've been taking notes. So this morning we heard from Kaiser and Cine from the European Patient Forum and the Consumer Group, saying that it's clear that patients and consumers want better information on products. There was a plea for unbiased regulatory approved information. We also emphasized that we move to adopting new digital technologies, but we should remain inclusive of citizens who have less access to these technologies and avail themselves of the risk of health. So we avoid the risk of health inequalities for the elderly, for the disempowered, for the disengaged. And I think one speaker put it as universality, which I thought was a very nice term to capture that. We also had our 3 pillars from Commissioner Andriukaitis, and I think that sums up very nicely where we're headed. So it's 1, secure data access and sharing. 2, connecting health data for improved health. And 3, strengthening citizen empowerment and individual care. And we also recognize that there's a need to strive to improve content, and that was something, Theo, that you kept coming back to. And this includes user testing, and these are actions that are already foreseen in the action plan. And Dr. Said, I think you said it yourself, we should see it as opportunities to open doors, not close them, and that any actions to improve content will continue. And if anything, this will hopefully facilitate that work in the future. We see the definition of a common standard as an essential first step. That I think there was consensus clearly on. And this should be followed by the commitment of stakeholders for implementation. We heard a lot about not getting lost in the downstream, but focusing on the EPI itself. And I think that actually has been very, very clarifying on many levels. We also had some nice metaphors about building cathedrals, but also climbing Mount Everest and recognizing that we should start small if we're going to succeed. Bear in mind, we've had lots of experience in the past and we don't want to repeat mistakes of the past. Now, we also note that, well, it's our understanding that countries will wish to adopt EPI at different speeds, and I think that is a reality. And so we want to be as flexible as we can, and we can play with the wording around that key principle. But it's clear that we don't want to lose sight of the goal of achieving a harmonized approach, and we'll need to agree on a roadmap to full implementation, maybe not transition, but to full implementation with clear timelines. What is very clear is this initiative is very timely. So we heard some excellent case studies or ongoing projects. I think Rosa said that there were 38 projects underway when she did the mapping exercise with colleagues here. In session 2, we heard details of 7 of those projects, and we also heard a presentation on a future research project, which is also very encouraging. So it's very clear that we need to build on the here and now. This is the moment to take action, and possibly not just at EU level, but let's be ambitious, at global level, so we can build a harmonized and efficient approach together. Next steps, all important. So we'll be publishing a report on this workshop, and that will include a report on the mapping exercise. We'll also be publishing the key principles that we've discussed in session 3 this afternoon. They will be going out for open public consultations for 6 months. So you do have time to further reflect. I would also encourage you to encourage others to have a look at the key principles and provide comments. And then following the review period, we'll go through those comments, we'll implement any remarks based on that review and any comments, and we'll come with a finalized version to guide our progress in moving forward towards EPI for all EU medicines. So in closing, I'd like to thank the European Commission. I'd like to thank our colleagues at the heads of medicines agencies for tremendous collaborative work on this important topic and for today's workshop. I would also like to thank the colleagues internally who've worked on mapping the development of the key principles document, and also with you, our stakeholders, for all your input today. When you're leaving today, please take care to take all your belongings. Before we close, I would like to say a huge thank you to 2 people, Nora and Nicola, for all their work behind the scenes, because these workshops can't run without somebody doing the organizational aspects, and they do it amazingly. And rather than a Mexican wave, a round of applause. So thank you very much, and I wish you all safe journeys home.